I didn't realize I had stopped breathing until I nearly dropped my coffee. It was one of those mornings where the air bites just hard enough to remind you you're still alive, but not enough to make you feel it's worth it. The sky was that dull kind of blue-gray that never quite brightens, no matter how late the sun climbs. And I was in my usual spot, front porch worn rocking chair, wrapped in an old blanket that used to smell like my husband. Now, it just smells like distance, like time that got left behind in a truck cab somewhere near the Colorado border. My third cup of coffee had already gone lukewarm. I wasn't drinking it for the taste, not really. I was drinking it for the weight of the cup in my hand, for something to hold on to, something to do besides feel how empty the house had become since Robert left again, just like he always does. And I wasn't watching anything special, just the street, the trees, the neighbor's dog sniffing the same damn bush it sniffed yesterday. But then, the door across the street creaked open, right on cue. And there he was, the boy I don't know, but can't stop noticing. He walked like someone who didn't know he was being watched. But I was watching every morning, every single one, his hoodie half-zipped, dark curls barely tamed, headphones dangling like an afterthought, probably heading to his first lecture of the day, earbuds in, world out. Nothing unusual except today. Something was. Halfway to his beat-up sedan, he stopped, just stopped, and turned his eyes dark, unreadable, found mine, and held not the kind of look you get from someone who sees you as an old lady sipping her morning regrets. No, it was something else, like he knew not everything, just enough to make my pulse skip in a way I thought I'd left behind with my 20s. He didn't smile, didn't wave, just looked. And the stillness of it reached across the street like a hush after a confession. Then he turned, got in his car, drove off, and I couldn't stop shaking. Not because he scared me, not because he excited me, but because for 1 second, one single second, I wasn't invisible anymore, and that terrified me more than the loneliness ever did. I didn't realize how quiet it had become until the wind shifted and the porch chimes didn't move. It was early November in upstate New York, the kind of morning that slips through the cracks of your windows, even when they're shut tight. The kind of cold that doesn't just sit on your skin, it seeps in. You feel it in your knuckles, in your chest, like a warning. I sat on the porch like I always did, same chair, same view, same mug of coffee that went cold too fast. The blanket over my shoulders had a hole in it from years of wear, and I could still trace the faint scent of Robert's cologne if I pressed it close enough. Not the fresh scent, no. That had faded. What lingered now was a ghost of it, a memory, the aftertaste of a presence. He'd been gone almost a week. Cross-country Hall said he might not be back until Thanksgiving. I'd pretended not to mind, told him to take his time, be safe, bring back that ridiculous honey he always finds at the gas stations. He'd smiled the same tired smile, and kissed the top of my head like I was already sleeping. And maybe I was. There's something about long marriages no one warns you about. They don't end in shouting or tears or some dramatic exit. No, they end in silence, in long stretches of time where nothing breaks and nothing blooms either, just this pause, as if someone pressed mute and forgot. I looked across the street. The house there used to be empty, listed for months. Then a woman bought it with her teenage son. Or maybe he was early 20s, I wasn't sure. I'd seen him every day since late August, same routine. 7 a.m., out the door, backpack slung, headphones in. But today he was late. 10 minutes past 7, and no sign of him. I sipped my coffee, lukewarm and bitter, and wondered why it mattered. It didn't, not really. Except it did. Because ever since I first saw him, something inside me had been shifting, not in any way you'd expect. There was no fantasy, no story I was telling myself. It was just a presence. He had won. And mine had been fading for years. When he finally stepped out, I saw the hurried posture, the rush in his stride. Jacket only half zipped, hair a mess. But still, something about him made the air feel charged. And then he looked up, not at the sky, not at his car, at me. Our eyes met, brief, sharp, like a thread pulled tight across a room. And for that 1 second, I forgot what month it was, forgot how old I was, forgot how long it had been since someone had looked at me like I wasn't just part of the background. Jayden Cruz. I'd heard his name once, from a delivery guy who misread our addresses. That was all I had, a name, and a glance that felt like a tremor in the middle of my morning stillness. He turned away first, stepped into his car, and drove off. But the stillness didn't return. Instead, my heart wouldn't settle. My hands felt too warm against the mug. My breath had shortened without me realizing. And I knew, deep in the part of me I rarely visited anymore, that something had shifted, not outside, not across the street, inside me. Something I hadn't felt in years had stirred. It wasn't desire. It wasn't fear. It was the terrifying awareness that I still existed. The next morning, I was on the porch 10 minutes earlier than usual. Ridiculous. Really. I tried to tell myself I just wanted to enjoy the fresh air, maybe catch the sunrise for once. But I knew better. I was waiting. Coffee in hand, blanket over my lap. The wind was sharper today. It cut through the flannel of my pajama pants and left a chill climbing up my calves. Still, I didn't move. I kept my eyes on the door across the street, like it was a curtain about to rise. 7 o'clock came, and so did he. Jayden stepped out. Same rushed gait, same oversized hoodie, except this time he paused to lock the door behind him. His fingers fumbled with the keys. He looked up. Our eyes met again, but only for a flicker. I should have looked away, should have smiled politely, offered a neighborly nod. Instead, my hand lifted almost against my will. I waved. He hesitated. The morning held its breath then. He waved back. It was small, barely more than a twitch of fingers, but it made something warm bloom under my ribs. I don't remember the last time someone responded to a wave like it mattered, like they saw me. Not just some woman on a porch blending into the scenery. I took a sip of coffee to cover my nerves. My hand was trembling. Then something happened I didn't expect. Jayden didn't just continue on his way. He stopped right there on the sidewalk. He looked at me again, more directly this time. And then, slowly, he crossed the street. Each step felt like a question. Each second stretched. By the time he reached the foot of my porch, I wasn't breathing. "Morning," he said. His voice surprised me, lower than I imagined, but soft, like someone taught to speak gently in a loud world. "Morning," I replied, setting my mug down. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Running late?" He gave a half shrug. "Yeah, kinda, class at 8. His smile wasn't broad, but it was real honest. The kind of smile people give when they're not performing. "What are you studying?" I asked. "Computer science." I nodded like I understood what that meant. I didn't, but I wanted him to keep talking. He glanced back at his car, then at me again. "I see you out here a lot," he said. "Every morning, actually." It caught me off guard. My instinct was to laugh, to brush it off with something like old people habits. But I didn't. "Yeah," I said instead. "I like the quiet. I like watching the world start." He tilted his head a little, like he was thinking about that. Then he smiled again. "That's kind of nice." Something about the way he said it, simple, unaffected, made my chest tighten. We stood there in silence for a moment, the cold forgotten. His breath curled in the air between us like smoke. "I should go," he said, gesturing toward his car. "Of course," I replied, too quickly. He turned to leave, then paused. "What's your name?" he asked. "Claire." He nodded once. "Nice to meet you, Claire." He said it like it meant something, then he walked away. And I sat back, heart still racing, coffee long forgotten. What had I just done? It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't a plan. It was a ripple, a small, quiet shift. But I knew deep down I wouldn't be able to stop it from spreading. The house felt different after he left. Not louder, not warmer, just different, like something had been stirred in the air and hadn't settled yet. I walked back inside with my empty coffee mug and found myself standing in the kitchen longer than necessary, staring at the same old calendar. I never flipped past August. I didn't know what I was waiting for. I kept thinking about the way he said my name, Claire, not like a kid talking to someone's mom, not like a student talking to a neighbor, just a name like it was mine, without apology. I wandered through the house, touched the top of the piano I hadn't opened in years, adjusted a vase that didn't need adjusting. My fingers were restless, so was my head. By late afternoon, I decided to go for a walk. Nothing special, just down the street, past the tall maple trees clinging to their last gold leaves, past the cracked sidewalk where the kids used to draw with chalk. The wind had picked up. I pulled my coat tighter around me, scarf knotted high under my chin. When I returned, The driveway wasn't empty. Robert's truck. I froze for a moment before continuing up the path. My breath caught somewhere between surprise and irritation. He wasn't supposed to be back until Friday. It was only Wednesday. The front door opened before I even reached the steps. "There she is," he said, smiling, tired eyes squinting against the wind. Surprise. His voice was gravelly, like always after a long haul, and he smelled like coffee and road miles and cheap motel soap. The scent used to make me feel safe today. It just made me feel unsettled. "You're home early," I said, trying to sound pleased. I stepped forward for a hug, his arms wrapped around me with familiarity, and I let him. But there was no spark, just warmth, just history. "Got done sooner than expected," he said as we stepped inside. "Didn't want to sit in a motel another night." I nodded. "I made a stew yesterday, still some left, I think." He didn't seem to notice the shift in my tone. We moved through the motions easily, like actors who knew their lines too well. He dropped his duffel by the laundry room door. I reheated the stew. He stretched in his usual chair, cracking his back, talking about traffic and a diner that overcharged for eggs. I smiled when expected, asked follow-up questions, but my mind wasn't there. It was across the street, on the porch, replaying moments that felt too brief, but impossibly vivid. After dinner, I poured him a cup of coffee, black with just a pinch of sugar. He looked at me, eyes softer now. "I know I've been away a lot," he said, "more than usual." "You always been away a lot," I replied. Not unkindly, he sighed, rubbed his jaw. "It's not forever, Claire. I'm just trying to get ahead a little, you know." I nodded. "I know." He hesitated. "Actually, I've got another run lined up, leaves tomorrow night, cross-border haul." I stared at the countertop. My hand gripped the edge too tightly. "I see," I said. My voice was level, too level. "You okay with that?" he asked. "Of course. It's your job." He leaned forward a little, searching my face. "You sure?" I smiled, practiced and smooth. "Positive you've got your purpose. Robert, I get it." The words landed between us like a stone. He didn't respond right away, just sipped his coffee and looked out the window, the one that faced the street. My gaze followed his, but I didn't see the neighborhood. I saw the shape of something I didn't have a name for yet. And I knew Robert being home didn't fill the quiet anymore. It only reminded me how loud my silence had become. Robert left just after sunrise. I stood by the window with my arms crossed, the hem of my robe brushing against my bare ankles. I didn't wave. He didn't expect me to. The engine of his truck rumbled like a slow exhale, steady and heavy. I watched the tail lights disappear at the curve where the road dipped, and then he was gone again. The house didn't sigh in relief. It didn't creak with emptiness. It just settled into a silence I'd grown used to wearing like a second skin. But I didn't sit on the porch this time. I didn't want to be seen in that robe, with that look in my eyes. Not this morning. Instead, I walked to the bedroom and opened the closet like it was a question. My fingers ran along hangers filled with clothes I hadn't touched in years, things that belonged to another version of me. I pulled out a dark green dress, nothing too bold, but it fit, still, a little snug at the waist, a little low at the neckline. It would do. By the time I stepped outside, it was nearly 3 in the afternoon. The sun had softened, casting long, drowsy shadows across the yard. I swept the porch, tidied up cushions that didn't need straightening. Then I dragged the two-seater couch in the living room slightly off its mark, just enough to make the request seem believable. At 3:59, I stood in the living room, heart pounding. When the doorbell rang, I nearly jumped. I took a breath, smoothed my dress, opened the door. Jayden stood there in a white tank top and jeans, hair still damp at the ends like he'd just showered. He looked surprised for a moment, maybe at me, maybe at the effort I'd made not to look effortless. "Hey," he said. "Come in," I replied, stepping aside. He moved past me, and I caught the scent of citrus and something faintly metallic, like skin still cooling from heat. I gestured toward the couch. "This thing's heavy," I said, voice casual. "Thought it'd be easier with help." He nodded, already stepping into position. "Which way?" "Just over there, near the window." We lifted together. I let him take the brunt of the weight. His arm brushed mine as we turned. A thin film of warmth lingered where we touched. When we finished, I stepped back, pretending to admire the new angle. "Much better," I said, though it wasn't. He smiled faintly. Glad I could help. There was a pause. I didn't rush to fill it. I walked to the kitchen and pulled 2 drinks from the fridge, sparkling water, cold and sweating. I handed him one. He took it, fingers brushing mine. "Thanks." We stood there, each sipping, the sound of the fizz, the soft hum of the fridge. It was all louder than either of us speaking. I set my bottle down, sat on the edge of the couch. We just moved. Looked up at him. "You work out?" I asked, tone light. He laughed, a quiet sound. "A bit most evenings." "Figures," I said. "That sofa barely slowed you down." He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes dropping for a second. "It's not that heavy." I patted the space beside me. "Sit just for a minute." He hesitated, then joined me, not too close, but close enough that I could feel the gravity shift. Our shoulders didn't touch, but the space between us had a shape. And God help me, I wanted to lean into it. I didn't. Instead, I looked straight ahead and said, "I used to move furniture all the time when I was your age." Jayden smiled. "You don't look that old." It should have been a compliment, but it landed differently, like an invitation I didn't know how to respond to. I turned to him. He turned too. We looked at each other. And then I said, "Thank you for coming, Jayden, really." He nodded once, slowly. "Anytime, Claire." He stood. "So did IWE." Walked to the door together. He opened it, stepped out, then looked back. For a moment, neither of us said a word. Then he smiled. And I closed the door with shaking fingers, not from fear, not from shame, but from something deeper, something alive. I didn't plan on asking him to stay for dinner. It just happened, like so many things lately. One moment I was thanking him at the door, and the next I heard myself saying, "I've made too much soup, would you like a bowl?" He paused, one foot already on the porch, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Hesitation, maybe, or surprise. But then he nodded. Sure, that'd be nice. He stepped back inside, and I tried not to fumble with the lights. The sun had dipped behind the trees, casting long blue shadows through the windows. I busied myself in the kitchen, ladling out the stew, grabbing 2 bowls, then stopping, suddenly unsure if I should light candles or turn on the overhead. I settled on the pendant, light above the table, warm, soft, safe. Jayden sat across from me, elbows resting lightly on the table. Spoon in hand, he smiled after the first bite. "This is really good." "Thank you," I said, and meant it more than I should have. I watched him eat like it was a performance I didn't want to miss. We talked, mostly about nothing. He told me about classes, professors who mumbled too much, a roommate who never cleaned the microwave. I listened, really listened, because the sound of his voice filled something I hadn't realized was hollow. I asked if he had family nearby. He shook his head. "It's just my mom and me. She works nights." That explained the quiet across the street, the still windows, the boy who walked himself through mornings and came home alone. The idea tugged at something soft inside me. I didn't say much about myself, just that I was retired, that my husband traveled, that the house got too quiet sometimes. He nodded like he understood. We finished eating. I offered him tea, which he accepted. We moved to the couch, not the one we'd dragged earlier, but the smaller one near the bookshelf, the one that always felt more private. He sat at one end. I sat at the other, legs curled beneath me, mug warm in my hands. The space between us was deliberate, but not uncomfortable. "I don't usually do this," he said after a while, glancing at me. "What?" I asked, my voice almost a whisper. "Hang out with, neighbors." I smiled. "You mean older women?" He laughed, embarrassed. "I didn't mean it like that." "It's okay," I said. "I am." He looked at me for a long moment, and I didn't look away. There was no flirtation, no games, just a weight in the air. The kind that comes before something irreversible. A part of me wanted to touch his hand, just to see if it would burn. But I didn't. We talked a little more, softer now, his voice low, mine lower, the kind of conversation that stretches into silence without breaking it. At some point, he checked the time and stood. "I should go," he said. I walked him to the door again. This time, when he opened it, the cold came rushing in. He hesitated on the threshold. "Thanks for dinner," he said. "You're welcome." Then he added, "You're easy to talk to." The door closed behind him, and I leaned against it for a moment, breath shallow. In the hush that followed, I heard the echo of his voice. "You're easy to talk to." I stood there until my legs felt too heavy, then walked back to the kitchen. The bowls were still in the sink, untouched by the night. I washed them slowly, one by one, let the water run hot over my hands. And as the steam curled around my face, I whispered the truth into the silence. I didn't want him to leave. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed with the lamp on low, staring at the ceiling like it might offer an answer. The house hummed around me, heating vents groaning, the old fridge clicking, some far-off wind playing with the gutters. My mind refused to quiet. Every sound was louder, every shadow heavier. I kept seeing him at the door. The way he hesitated, the way he smiled, the way his voice softened when he said goodnight. I rolled over and checked my phone, no messages. Of course not. I wasn't expecting one. I told myself that again and again, like a lullaby for someone too old to need it. In the morning, I didn't go to the porch. I couldn't bear it. What if he walked by and didn't look? What if he did instead? I stayed in the kitchen, holding my coffee close to my chest like it was the only thing keeping me anchored. The mug warmed my hands, but not much else. The minutes ticked by. 7:05, 7:10. I gave in, moved to the window, watched through the slats. He came out late again, this time in a navy hoodie, hands in his pockets, head down. He didn't look toward the porch. He didn't pause. He just walked. And it felt like something in me shrank, not out of rejection, out of the realization that I'd come to expect something. A glance, a word, something that made me feel not alone. I hated that. Hated the part of me that wanted too much from too little. That afternoon, I walked past the mirror in the hallway and stopped. I really looked at the lines around my eyes, the tiredness in my shoulders, the slight curve of my back I didn't notice last year. I should have seen a stranger, but I didn't. I saw someone who had waited too long to ask what she wanted. At 2:47, I texted him. Hey, forgot to ask yesterday. Could you help me with one more thing? Promise it's the last time, just a bookshelf. Around 4. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Sure, 4 works. I set the phone down. My hands were shaking. I walked into the guest room and looked at the bookshelf. It didn't need moving. But I did. The next hour moved slowly, each minute stretching, yawning, dragging its feet like a child resisting bedtime. At 3:30, I showered. At 3:45, I stood too long in front of the mirror again. At 3:58, I heard his car door. When I opened the front door, he was standing there, same hesitant smile, same hands deep in his jacket pockets. Hi, he said. Come in, I answered. He stepped inside, and I closed the door. The silence that followed didn't feel awkward, it felt. Aware he followed me to the guest room, I pointed at the bookshelf. Just need it moved a few inches to the right. He nodded, bent slightly, shifted the piece. I watched his hands, watched the way his shoulders moved. He looked up. Better? Yes. But I wasn't looking at the shelf anymore. He stepped back, brushed the dust from his palms. I stood near the doorway. He moved toward me. We didn't touch. But the space between us said everything. And in that moment, a stillness settled around us. Not cold, not heavy, just suspended, like something waiting to be decided. And I knew whatever happened next would not be undone. The air between us had weight, not tension, not fear, just something thick enough to hold in your lungs. Jayden stood in front of me, not too close, not too far. His hands were at his sides. Mine were folded in front of me like I didn't trust them. I couldn't look away from his face, not because of what it meant, but because of what it didn't. He wasn't asking. He wasn't pushing. He was just there. I stepped aside. "Would you like some tea?" I asked, my voice softer than I expected it to be. He nodded. "Yeah, that'd be nice." In the kitchen, everything felt louder, the sound of the kettle filling, the clink of mugs, the quiet creak of the cabinet hinge I never got around to fixing. I focused on the motions, trying to steady my breathing. When the water boiled, I poured it into 2 mugs and brought them into the living room. He followed behind, silent, careful. I handed him his cup, and for a moment, our fingers touched, not by accident, but not on purpose either. We sat again, like before, opposite ends of the couch. A polite distance, but everything had changed. The steam from the tea curled upward between us, rising slowly, twisting like thought. "Thanks," he said, glancing at me. "You're welcome." The words were simple, but they floated too long in the air. I took a sip, then set the mug down. He mirrored me. I didn't know who moved first, only that we were closer, only that the silence had shifted. There was no plan, no calculation, only a hum behind my ribs, a thrum in my skin. His gaze met mine, held it. And in that moment, something passed between us, not a look, not a thought, but a current, quiet, deep, inevitable. I felt a warmth bloom in my chest, not from the tea, not from his body, but from somewhere deeper, like a forgotten fire finding breath again. We didn't speak. There was no need. The room folded in on itself. The clock ticked, unnoticed. Outside, the wind brushed the siding inside. A stillness took hold. It was like stepping into water you didn't know was there, slow at first, then sudden. A pull you don't resist, not because you can't, but because you no longer want to. A shift in breath, a closeness that was no longer casual. I closed my eyes, and in that quiet, I felt a surge, a rising tide of heat, of light, of something too vast to name, not touch, not skin, but a spark catching. And in its glow, I no longer remembered the rules, only the rhythm of a truth I'd buried for too long, that I was still capable, still wanting, still alive. When I opened my eyes, his were already watching me, and nothing needed to be said. The house was still when I woke. No birdsong, no hum from the fridge, just the soft, blank quiet of a place holding its breath. The light had shifted, pale morning leaking through the blinds, stretching across the floor like something hesitant. I reached for the other side of the bed before I remembered. There was no one there. Jayden had left sometime in the early hours. I didn't hear him go. Or maybe I did and didn't want to know. The last thing I remembered was the way the silence wrapped around us after. After the moment, everything changed. I sat up slowly. My body felt weightless and heavy at the same time, like I wasn't fully in it yet. The sheets still held the echo of warmth, a dent on the pillow that wasn't mine. I stared at it too long, then got up. The hallway was dim, the floor cold against my feet. I moved through the kitchen like I was moving through memory, reaching for the coffee, the filter, the same old steps. But everything felt off slower, like I was watching myself from across a pane of glass. I poured a cup and stood by the window across the street. His house was quiet, curtains drawn, driveway empty. My chest tightened, not from fear, not from shame, but from the sudden and absolute knowledge that something had closed, like a door I hadn't meant to open had swung wide in the dark. And now it was gone. I waited for anything, a movement, a sign. But the street gave me nothing. Hours passed like fog. I cleaned the guest room even though it wasn't messy, folded the laundry that hadn't been touched, rearranged spices I never used. Every motion felt like a distraction dressed up as duty. By mid-afternoon, I sat at the dining table with my phone face down. No message, no knock, nothing. A small voice inside me whispered that I'd imagined it all, that the warmth, the pull, the impossibility of it was just some elaborate dream built by a lonely woman who wanted to feel again. I ignored the voice, mostly. By evening, the sky bruised into purple. I turned on the porch light, even though no one was coming. And still, I waited, not because I believed he would return, but because something in me refused to close. That night, the bed felt colder than before, not because he wasn't there, but because now I knew what it meant when someone was. Robert came back 2 days later. I heard the gravel crunch under his tires before I saw the truck. That sound always gave me a strange feeling, used to be comfort. Now it was something else, a kind of warning. He stepped inside like nothing had changed, like the walls still knew him, like my body hadn't learned how to carry another silence. "Hey," he said, setting his duffel down with a groan. God, I hate that stretch of highway through Ohio. Always feels like it never ends. I nodded. My smile felt rehearsed. He kissed my cheek. His lips were dry, chapped from the road. I let it happen. "How was the house?" he asked, dropping into the kitchen chair like he always did. "Quiet," I said, and meant it more than he knew. We went through the motions. I made coffee. He told me stories I only half heard. Something about a truck stop breakfast, a radio caller with a bad joke. I laughed when he expected me to. I stirred sugar into his cup without being asked. I didn't ask anything in return because all my questions lived across the street. Jayden hadn't been outside since that morning. No hoodie, no backpack, no music echoing faintly from earbuds, just stillness. And now, Robert was home with his hands, his habits, his quiet breath at night. That evening, we ate dinner in front of the TV, some rerun of a crime drama playing too loud. He leaned back, full and tired, and reached for my hand. I let him take it, but I didn't feel it. I stared at the screen while a character bled out under fluorescent lights. Nothing about it shocked me. Nothing moved. Even the fictional loss felt more alive than what sat beside me afterward. While he unpacked in the bedroom, I stepped outside to take out the trash. The night air was crisp, the street empty, until I heard it. "Claire," someone called, low and cautious. I turned. It was Evelyn, the neighbor 2 doors down, mid-50s. Knows everyone's business before they do, she walked over, arms folded, voice hushed. "You've seen that boy lately, the Cruz kid?" I swallowed. "Not in a few days." She gave a little shake of her head. "He's been real quiet. Heard his mom yelling through the window yesterday. Something about poor choices. Something about moving." I didn't speak. She leaned in a little. "You okay?" I nodded, too quickly. She studied me, then gave a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Well, just checking in." Then she walked off. I stood there for a long time, the trash bag still in my hand, the wind tugging at the hem of my sweater. When I went back inside, Robert was snoring faintly in the bedroom. I moved quietly, carefully, like I didn't want to wake the version of me I'd become. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. The screen glowed against the dark. One unread message, subject: "I need to talk from Jayden Cruz." My fingers hovered over the trackpad. And for the first time in days, I let myself feel the ache, not because it hurt, but because it reminded me I was still here. We met in a small coffee shop off Route 79, the kind of place where no one looks up when you walk in. The air smelled like burnt espresso and cinnamon. The windows were fogged. The light was soft, golden. It felt like a pause between sentences. Jayden was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window, hands wrapped around a mug, eyes distant. He looked older somehow, not in years, in weight, like something had been carried too long. I sat down without speaking. He looked up, then away. "Thanks for coming," he said. I nodded, of course. A long silence stretched between us, not cold, not angry, just full. "I'm transferring," he said. "Next semester, different dorm, maybe different city." I waited. "My mom found out," he added. "She didn't ask questions, just started packing boxes." I swallowed. "I'm sorry." He shook his head. "No, I'm not blaming you. I made choices. We both did." I looked down at my hands. They didn't feel like mine anymore. Not since that night. Not since I let go of something I'd been gripping for decades. Jayden's voice softened. "I don't regret it, I just don't know what to do with it." I met his eyes. "Neither do I." Another silence, then he leaned back, arms folded across his chest, shoulders tight. I needed to say it out loud, that it wasn't nothing. "It wasn't," I said. He nodded, but didn't smile when we parted. It wasn't dramatic. No promises, no tears, just a quiet nod, a shared understanding, a leaving that didn't need to hurt to be final. I drove home with the window cracked, the cold wind slicing through the car. My fingers tapped the steering wheel like I was keeping time with a song I couldn't hear. When I stepped into the house, Robert was gone just for groceries. Nothing symbolic, nothing cinematic. But the stillness felt different, not heavy, just honest. I stood in the living room for a long time. Then I picked up the old calendar, peeled off the months. I'd ignored October, November. Gone, December stared back at me. A new page. The next morning, I returned to the porch, coffee in hand, blanket around my shoulders. The wind bit. But I didn't flinch. Across the street, a moving truck idled. The cruise house was nearly empty. I watched, not out of longing, not out of hope, just to witness it. And then, out of nowhere, a child's laughter echoed down the street. I turned. A boy no older than 10 zipped by on a scooter, his jacket flapping, hair wild, face lit with a freedom I hadn't felt in years. He passed my porch, looked up, grinned, and waved. I waved back, not because I needed to, because I wanted to. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough.